Good afternoon, everyone. Want to welcome all of you guys to this India Retailing webinar. We have an excellent panel today of guests and speakers from some of India's leading brands. The session topic is lesson learned in online retail. And for the panelists, I'll modify that sentence a bit more. Lessons learned in the post-pandemic online and offline retail. There's a lot of learning for all of us, and we're still in the middle of it as we speak, which truly gives us a great discussion to have with all of you. A quick introduction for the panelists or about the panelists. On the panel, we have Sumit Dhingra, who is the Vice President and GM for South East Asia and India for Crocs. Ayush Tenwala, who's an Executive Director at Bagzones Lifestyle. And Levin Dekhraj, who's a director at Cotton World. Fantastic panel, you guys, and thanks for joining. We're covering a lot of categories between footwear and accessories and apparel. And so it'll be a great discussion for us to learn from you guys. We'll start off with a few questions around setting the context about the panel, and then we'll jump into some question and answers. We'll leave the last 10 minutes or so for questions from the audience. So if you're in the audience, please hold off with your questions until then. We'll give you some time to ask questions to the panelists. So guys, for context, it has been a tremendous learning experience with the pandemic for all of us, a very Six Sigma event for our businesses in terms of what we've had to cope up with. In fact, as we were discussing, I don't think we're out of it yet. We are still trying to get back to what is normal. I think the pandemic created a set of unique challenges for us in the industry, for you guys as retailers, for us as ecosystem partners, where we were looking at a very different model of operating. I know all of us have been working on digital initiatives, online initiatives in the past, but COVID kind of fast forwarded our thinking a bit in terms of what consumers are asking for, given the nature of the situation. A huge shift in consumer mindsets, a huge shift in consumer behaviors to kind of start utilizing multiple channels to shop beyond just stores, which were inoperational for a good chunk of time because of the lockdowns. And so, COVID to a certain extent has really changed the paradigm in the way we think about being present where our customers are, because that is a true kind of goal of an omnichannel retailer, is to utilize the right channels where the customers are present and to be present where they are. So given that context, and given where things have evolved over the last year and a half, would love to hear from all of you guys, and I'll call on you guys individually, but would love to hear from you to help set context on how things have evolved for you guys. What are the specific challenges, if you could outline the top 2 or 3 for each panelist, in terms of key challenges from a multi-channel or an omni-channel point of view that have really come up during this time. And then we'll get into a discussion a bit more around what have we learned from that. So Sumit, since you're leftmost on my grid, I'll start with you. Want to give us a quick overview of the business during this time and the key challenges you faced?
Yeah, so thanks, Mukul. A very interesting topic and really in sync with the times and the situation that we are in. So just to set the context, last year when the pandemic struck, which was around 15 months back, I think a lot of us were very confused on how to do scenario building from there, because a lot of us had planned, we had business cases for slowdowns, but I don't think any of us had planned businesses for shutdowns. And this was really a shutdown scenario that we saw where cash flows were hit, inventories were hit. There was a real concern about safety of employees, partners, and people working in the front line in our stores and DCs. So when the pandemic struck, our first goal was to ensure that people are safe. And the second goal was to ensure that business continuity stays. And we set out 2 set of paths for the organization. First was a defensive set of path, where we said, how can we ensure that in the short run, we get things in control, whether that's our cash flows, whether that's our inventory situation. And those are important because organizations are built like rivers. Cash really has to come in, and that's how the outflow happens. They are not built like reservoirs. So that was one key learning. Second was to ensure that whenever the pandemic ends, and of course we had built scenarios where pandemic could end in 3 months, 6 months, last more than a year. Our primary goal was to end strong so that when the pandemic is over, and the opportunities to grow are there, we can really fully utilize. And a clean inventory situation leads to better decision making, and you can take better decisions. With those in mind, I think we set ourselves to execute those short-term defensive set of actions. At the same time, like every crisis, it also offered areas of opportunity. And we also set ourselves goals which were more offensive in nature. Is there an opportunity to gain share, both digitally and offline? Is there an opportunity to really stand out in the minds of our consumers? Is there an opportunity to reach out to consumers in a be more empathetic to the situation and help out the communities that we are operating in? And we really set ourselves on those paths, and very glad to say that so far we are very happy with the progress. In both set of goals, we have been able to navigate the pandemic pretty well. Of course, the crisis is still not over. The pandemic has lasted longer than what most of us would have wished for or thought of, and it's still not over. We are just out of the second wave, and there are talks about the third wave. But this time around, I think we are more sure of the scenario building, more sure of what actions to take, more sure of what could the outcome be. And to be honest, things are not as bad as we thought they would be at the end of last year. It's extremely unfortunate what's happening around us. There is a loss of livelihoods. A lot of businesses are facing very tough time, but thankfully for us, we have seen the momentum accelerate in these times. And that was one of our assumptions, because when we went into the pandemic, we had the brand momentum behind us. And our belief was that strong brands would not only survive, but thrive, and would have an opportunity to gain share. And with that positive mindset, I think we entered it, and we are actually seeing that happen. And we are seeing momentum actually accelerating in these times. And of course, the playbook has changed. We are not executing the same playbook, what we were doing pre-pandemic. And the playbook, we have leaned more towards digital. We were already a digital first organization. And I would explain what we mean by that. We have become even more digital oriented in these times. We are also seeing opportunities of expansion in offline, because not every brand is looking to expand network. So we are seeing more prime locations coming. Rentals are being soft at this time. At the same time, there are certain challenges which are still there. Biggest of which is, how do you really plan demand when there are waves which come and go? So there are times when your sales is off the charts, and as the momentum builds up, there's another wave and set of closures. There are operational challenges on operating DC stores, vaccination for the staff. And we have a pretty global supply chain. We are seeing issues on the supply chain end as well, where either factories are getting impacted, or the whole situation on freight and ports is becoming challenging. So these are new set of challenges which were not there pre-pandemic, but overall, I think very happy with the way we have navigated it. There are a lot of learnings that all of us can take, and some of them would probably hold good even after the pandemic is over.
Fantastic. Thanks for that summary. It's great to hear that you guys have kind of got that momentum back again, and you're gaining share in the market, like you said. A lot of great points from you. We'll kind of come back to some of these points as we have the discussion. I'll switch gears to Ayush. Ayush, would love to hear from you. How are things going with Lavi and your brands, and how have things been during the pandemic? And how are you? What are the kind of key challenges you've been navigating from an omni-channel, but also from an overall business point of view?
Right. So for us, or at least the way I look at the business, we look at different verticals of the business into different product categories, and it's been kind of interesting to see how different categories are kind of shifting, evolving. Of course, the largest of the group brands being Samsonite, the travel sector being absolutely decimated, or absolutely shocked that what is going to happen for the first couple of months when everything is shut down. But I think that was the situation of all businesses. I think the big, the clear sign we do see is that with one of the brands like Wakul, that where it becomes an essential purchase, the demand is far more robust, and it actually kind of recovers far more quickly. So it's kind of interesting to see how consumers are reacting to different categories. Like we do see kind of in the open footwear, probably not as exposed to it or as close to it as Sumit is, but definitely closed footwear consumers are moving to open footwear, so on and so forth. I think in terms of consumer behavior, one of the things that has become clear for us is food retailing is continue to drive a lot of footfalls. And if you can be kind of present in the environment in which food is retailed, then you always have the opportunity to make a sale. But if you're only present where the footfall is driven by kind of non-essential purchases, then you're kind of always at the whims of the government and people's expectations, etc., etc. So I think that has been kind of one of the trends we've been seeing. So demand in hypermarkets whenever it's open is robust. Demand in CST stores is robust. General trade markets also are kind of robust when and where they're allowed to open, especially around marriage seasons. Uh, so that has been kind of good to look at. On the digital and the kind of the omni side of it, I think that Lavi particularly is the brand that is most present in online or most focused in online, and has been seeing practically maybe 2x or 3x growth over last year. And that is a result of all the departmental stores being shut, all the malls being shut, that demand really shifting to online. And fortunately for us, we just implemented a kind of a big local sourcing, local manufacturing initiative about 1 year before the start of lockdown. And that is what we really accelerated and used to kind of combat the other supply chain issues that other people with international supply chains are kind of today facing in India. But probably my approach to it was not as kind of organized as Sumit's. But the way I kind of really looked at it was, after the dust had settled, which was maybe April and May, with the dust settling down, we really looked very quickly that, because we've been seeing the trend for the last 6 months, 12 months, even before the pandemic, that consumers were unhappy with offline and happier with online. And very quickly, we kind of reallocated our resources from offline into online. So from becoming a digital first company, we very quickly became a digital only company. And that is because that is what the situation has been in Lavi, one of the larger brands that we do run. But I think every brand has taken its own approach. Wakol has continued to remain very much focused on mall stores and retail stores, and that is a category and a price point that needs that kind of footprint and that kind of presence. And different categories fall everywhere between the kind of footprint. Handbags as a kind of a one size fits all category, very easy to shop in online, low returns, easy to gift, is very easy to kind of adapt and shift into online. Lingerie, high-end lingerie, very, very difficult to sell in online. And every category kind of slots somewhere in the middle. Our kind of omni-channel journey, if I tell you what we've been kind of up to, is that somewhere we started to activate regional hubs. Pre-pandemic, we were kind of looking at the omni-channel strategy a little bit more carefully. But really, when the dust settled in kind of May, June onwards, we realized that online is open and our stores are not open, so we cannot really cater to demand coming from the online only players such as Tata Click and Nykaa and those kind of guys. Like Myntra and Amazon are still easier to fulfill. So we kind of started to activate a network of about 3 regional DCs across India to also start doing marketplace operations for us other than just the alpha sellers. Because at the same time, we also saw that all their warehouses are full of FMCG products and food products. They don't really have so much of space to slot, kind of non-essential commodities. So, still kind of understanding and finding the right balance between omni-channel through store, between regional DC versus just running one mother warehouse. I think there's no right answer. It can be dependent to product, logistics costs vary depending on a category, margins depending vary on a category, and just kind of still walking through that journey. And that is kind of in a nutshell, where we are at today. Of course, with the second wave, just before the second wave, we were getting very bullish on offline once again in Lavi as well. But the second wave just came and kind of put all that back down. So now, of course, but fingers crossed. Last weekend, I think, was very, very positive. I think all retailers will be reporting very positive numbers of last weekend. I think mall traffic has been quite healthy. So that is the nature of the first wave, second wave, third wave. That you're on mute, Mukul. I can't.
Hopefully it continues.
Hopefully it continues, but we're in very, very hardball negotiation with malls. At least for some of our brands need retail more. So it's a very much of a mixed bag. Depending upon category to category, the way we have to kind of approach the challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, Ayush, thank you for that summary. And like you said, I think you have a mixed bag of brands in terms of what is working and one might not work in others. So I think you're adopting and adapting to the reality in different ways. So we'll come back to that a bit more on your channel strategy. Lavin, would love to hear from you. How are things going at Cotton World? How are you guys responding to the pandemic? And what are the kind of key challenges you're facing as you start to cater to customer needs across channels?
I actually told Mahua that I would be a very reluctant speaker because actually we are very small as a brand. We actually only have about 25 stores. So when the pandemic hit, obviously nobody thought it was going to last this long. And, we are not a corporation. So we basically are very driven by ourselves. So, for us, it's just been this thing to survive. So, and basically, technically, we are a bit of a dinosaur because of our age, and my cousin and my sister, we are basically running the thing. So we really didn't know too much about technology or online so even online, virtually our presence was virtually a zero, but this thing has definitely driven us to basically understand the future is digital and the future is online. There's no doubt about it. Even till today, I think half our stores are yet shut because out of the 23 that are left, 11 are in malls. So for us, it's just been an entire year first to get through and talking to the malls and the landlords to kind of, just do something with the rent because that's the key issue to survive that. Then with the staff and the logistics, and we even had a warehouse we have only one warehouse, so that was actually shut. So we couldn't even do online shipments. So for us, it was quite a disaster. Turnover, we've taken a big hit, but things aren't that bad. I think the second wave after the second wave is definitely, looking better than the situation after the first. But this really taught us a lesson to concentrate on the online. We are not on marketplaces yet. We are looking at getting on them very soon. We had our own website, which we were kind of ignoring for a long time. So in the last 6 months, we really paid attention to it. And from doing an X number, we are doing about maybe 30 times the number that we used to do. So, for us, I think the writing's on the wall. The standalone stores have been much more cooperative than the malls. I think the whole cycle has changed. We've till 2019, it's been an upward terms for malls, for stores to rent. I think sooner or later, we've come to a time when the rents have to actually cool down. And hopefully, if we get good deals, we're going to take them because finally a product, it's also a touch and feel thing, especially with our customer and our age group's a little older. But we are definitely looking at the online channels now for marketplace. That's where we have to be, and that is the future, whether you like it or not. So for us, it's just been actually quite a struggle to survive and stay alive, but things are looking much, much better now. Definitely.
Yeah, love it, and I appreciate your point of view because, like you said, this is a journey for brands at different parts of their digital journey, and it's always great to see brands who have really had to push the pedal during the pandemic to change the course from being largely offline to pushing on digital. So we'll come back to that. I think that there's some great learning there in terms of how do you kickstart that journey, how do you accelerate it at a time where your stores are not as productive as they should be, right? So great learning there. Guys, there's a consistent point that I think all of you guys raised as I was listening to you around this idea that you did see a digital shift, right? In whatever way you saw it, whether it was through your own sites or through marketplaces, or for the first time doing digital retail, like Lavin was mentioning, you did see this kind of dynamic shift in terms of channels. So to set context, so we know where you guys were during this pandemic for the audience, would love to just, this is a quick lightning round kind of question, right? Which is to understand how much of a shift did you see in your contribution from digital, right? So we'll talk in kind of absolute percentages and then kind of talk about a relative contribution. But, and again, I'll just go one by one. Ayush, what's the kind of high level number? How much incremental contribution are you seeing from digital pre versus post pandemic?
Yeah, on average, every brand would have said that their contribution online would have doubled, maybe 2x, 2x. So if you started with 20, you would be at 40. You started with 40 to 60. If you started,
that's a good idea to, that's a good way for us to kind of understand how big this has become for you guys. So it's doubled effectively for you as a group.
2x to 3x of what it used to be pre-pandemic.
Yeah. Sumit, what's the kind of guidance on how much digital has made a difference for your business? Relatively or absolute, whatever is easier for you.
Yeah, no, I agree with Ayush. So we have seen something similar. where digital has really scaled up. But part of the reason is also because stores were not able to operate for a large period of time. And we have seen that as and when stores have opened up, the traffic has come back way faster. And every lockdown has been a learning. So last time it was more like the sunrise, the way demand came back. And this time it's more like a flashlight. As soon as stores have opened, I think we have seen traffic, but digital definitely has gained share to the tune, as you said.
Okay. And Levin, you mentioned one number, which is your online has grown 30x. But as an overall kind of contributor to your revenue, are you seeing doubling or more?
For the online, I mean, we were virtually zero. So whatever we do is, I mean, we were actually doing about 20 times what we were doing, 20, 30 times. The store wise, I would say, all the stores, once they open, they're doing well. I mean, they're obviously not doing what they used to do before, but there are certain stores that actually are doing similar numbers what they were doing before. So this round's definitely looking better than the previous one. And our only setback is that half our stores are closed. So if they were open, I mean, we won't be that bad. So I mean, we are down only in terms of the numbers because the stores are down. Actually, the stores are shut.
Correct.
Till they open.
Correct. So let me switch gears to another point that I think all of you guys raised in different ways, but that was kind of the underlying assumption. Sumit mentioned this first when he said one of the big challenges for him was initially was the store shutdowns and inventory being a challenge, both from a global supply chain, Sumit, I'm assuming, but also from inventory being stuck in stores. I think that's one of the key learnings for us is, and I think Ayush mentioned this also, is with the demand unpredictability and the supply chain unpredictability, how do you match the demand, which is now out of your stores, and the inventory that is stuck and or in your stores? And that I'm sure is, and maybe not, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm assuming it's a challenge that all of you guys face. Would love to hear from you in terms of how you guys mitigated that very, very crucial challenge, because part of our job in the industry and as retailers for you guys is to help match supply and demand in a better way. So talk a bit more, start off with Sumit, since you raised this point, would love to hear from you in terms of how did you stop this inventory lockup from happening? And how did your digital initiatives help here, right? Were there things you were doing to help unlock this inventory in a smarter way that was stuck in various parts of the supply chain?
Yeah, so very valid question. And this was one of our key defensive goal that we ensure that inventory is allocated properly across channels where demand is. And we looked at it holistically. First was partners who didn't need it, especially the offline partners. We helped them with the cancellations, which normally we don't do because there is a exposure cost to cancellations and then there's a cost related. But as a good partner, we did that for our offline brick and mortar channel partners, because we didn't want them stuck with inventory without having a sales plan, because the sales plan was seriously impacted. Second was looking at the existing inventory and reallocating it basis the revised sales plan. And there was no one sales plan, right? We had to do scenario building last year because for a good 1 quarter, even the online was shut, the digital channels were shut, offline channels were shut. And as I said, demand came back slowly. And we were kind of staying nimble on allocation, not making fixed allocations to channels, not committing inventory till we saw the sales.
Yeah.
Third thing was being super agile on the whole supply chain and ensuring that there's flexibility on the whole supply chain in terms of lead times and how quickly can we produce and give the inventory. And of course, there are limitations there, but whatever we could do, we did. And the fourth one was staying, as I said, we are a digital first organization, and one cultural trait of a digital first organization is agility and ability to change as the technology is changing in the whole industry. And I'm very proud of how the organization was able to change last year, not only in terms of how could we grow business with our digital partner, but also how could we collaborate virtually, work from home. So the kind of change which we saw right from the basic working where everybody had to set up offices at home and then work to connecting with the digital partners and ensuring that they are supplied well, to ensuring that stores don't lose any demand, and we are able to connect the stores, the whole network, to ensure that the whole network acts as one reservoir of inventory rather than disparate islands of inventory scattered across the country, were some of the things that we went after.
Perfect. And I think you raised that important point, which is this pooling of inventory, right? Which is kind of almost if you were doing it before the pandemic, I think you realize a lot of benefit from it, and I think some of you guys were doing it before. If you were doing it if you're during the pandemic, it was almost that you had to do it because you had inventory lying around. But what's important here is that truly is a first step in unlocking a lot of value for brands, because you're for the first time making this inventory fungible and rationalizing at the same time, like you said, Sumit, right? Because you still want to have the availability of inventory for channels with an overflow as required. So a very critical step in the omni-channel journey, I'm sure, for you guys. Ayush, you had you mentioned a different problem on the inventory side, which was, or probably a positive, which was you had more localized supply chain for your inventory for some of your brands, where you were able to probably move faster on the supply chain in terms of ensuring your demand was met. But talk a bit more about your inventory issues and specifically on the point even that Sumit raised as his last point, which is this pooling effect. Were you able to use your inventory in a smarter way, given that your store demand probably had dropped, but other channel demand had picked up?
I mean, say, if I kind of just take the journey, like I think everybody had a very strong defensive game plan after kind of 3, 4, 5 months of lockdown, that how do you start to liberate cash and kind of get things moving once again.
Right.
Turn inventory into cash essentially to kind of keep the organizations running. And I think that, most companies, I'm taking liberties here, but most companies, I think, kind of faced the brunt of that by running out of inventory in October, November, December, that people started liquidating in maybe August, September, and by November, December, everybody's like, oh shit, wedding season has come, festive has come, and now we don't have anything to really go with. And the journey has been kind of been toughened by the increasingly hard stances on imports. I think prices from China just rising. A container used to cost maybe $500 pre-corona. Now is maybe up to what, $4,000, $4,500
Wow.
A container. So that the challenge of kind of ordering inventory, and the rupee was very unsteady. 70, 72 went up to what, 77, 78. Because when we entered the pandemic, we were still kind of largely importers. 60, 70, 80, 75% was kind of from imports. And really kind of the pooling of inventory is definitely important, but we're not really a very retail heavy company in that sense. So it's not like we have a lot of inventory that is committed in terms of percentages to our retail stores that we can really kind of try to unlock. So for us, that was not a big challenge to solve. But really kind of the big challenge to solve was, the channel management of the inventory, to kind of be kind of very nimble about that, and to kind of structurally solve the issue, because this was an issue the industry had been facing for the last many years. That, how do you kind of run a lean, working capital efficient organization when demand is unpredictable? Because when you manage a lot of different lines, it's always unpredictable to a certain extent, the demand. And I think that as we exit the pandemic, probably as a group, maybe upwards of 60, 65% will be now kind of getting domestically manufactured, with the goal of kind of getting it to up to 80% in the next year or so. And that is what we believe is a kind of structural solve, in the same way that maybe you hear of the example like Zara, IKEA, the legends of the industry, that they have to kind of structurally solve something to kind of really add exceptional value to the consumer. And that is what we look that the consumers will now start to demand, that they really need to have that exceptional value, which they cannot afford extra lead times at every step of the process. So that is
Thanks.
Kind of our short term was kind of get rid of the inventory. Medium term, we were regretting getting rid of the inventory, and in long term, we're kind of like, okay, now we need to figure out something that is not relying on somebody's gut feel that this is what the next month is going to look like. The system is set up in such a way that it can manage fluctuations to a much larger extent than it did previously.
Thanks, Ayush. Levin, you mentioned 25 plus or close to 25 stores that you guys were operating pre-pandemic, and a lot of your stores you mentioned were also in malls. How did the inventory issue play out for you guys? How were you able to manage with your supply chain and your inventory in your stores? And more importantly, as you had this huge growth in the online business, how did you manage your inventory to make it more fungible, reallocated to where other channels that were operating when your stores were shut?
For us, it's a different issue because we were so small. There's really not much to manage. So
Yeah,
the stores that are shut, the inventory is locked. You can't do anything about it. I mean, the mall's not going to let you take them out either. So for us, we had to just stop placing orders. So that's all we did. And then the stock you have is what you got to get rid of. So when the lockdowns open, obviously, like everyone, there was a lot of discounting and all being done. But then, as you say, the puzzle for every retailer is what do you order or how much do you order? Assuming that his business is going to be normal, is going to be 50% of normal, and being like a family-run thing, we are very conservative. So you may land up with a case where you don't have enough inventory. So that's for us is the big problem. But the second time around, we haven't discounted so much, and as I said, the sales are not too bad. So we are kind of now placing orders more regularly, but the inventory in the malls is yet closed. So, but right now it's EOS going on. So obviously, if they open now, I mean, there's no issue of goods. We also in a category where we sell more or less kind of everyday kind of clothing. It's not like high fashion or so it's not something to be really worried about if we don't get rid of it this month or in 3 months either. So it also depends, I think, on the category and what you're selling. So for us, it was quite simple, and we have only basically 5 or 6 suppliers. It's not like we're dealing with the whole bang of them. So we virtually just stopped placing orders, and as and when now we feel like we need it, if we're going to be running short in a category, we just have to look 2-3 months or 2 months in advance, because that's the time it would take to get something in. So it's not been that difficult really for us, but it's a matter of your stores being locked and just like right now, the stores that are open may need the goods, but my goods are stuck in the mall. The mall's not allowing me to open and take them out. What do I do? Yeah.
right.
A warehouse is always that's for online. We've had a warehouse which has enough goods. I mean, so we've been able to ship from there, except the time that it was closed for those 3 months or 4 months, I think, last year.
Yeah.
So for us, it's just
and
how much do you order now? Yeah.
How much you order, yeah, and frankly, as we've had this discussion with many retailers across Southeast Asia, I think this is the key concern that we heard from a lot of folks is, and this is, I guess, one of the key learnings that we've also kind of extrapolated from this is, if there's a set of retailers who, obviously everybody had the same challenges where inventory was locked up in stores, and you had new channels picking up where you had supply chain issues to fulfill that demand. Another leader, another brand said this in a more eloquent way, which was, unified inventory as a concept. Some of you guys are doing this already across channels. Others have accelerated during the pandemic. But if you had unified inventory during the pandemic or right after the lockdown, ended, it was almost like a Band-Aid, is what this gentleman said, right? Which was because we'd invested in this before the pandemic, we had this Band-Aid that allowed us to quickly make that inventory fungible. So as online picked up, we were able to fulfill that demand from unlocking the store inventory. And that's really what our job as retailers is, right? Is to kind of match supply and demand the smartest way. Either, like Sumit said, we're very good at forecasting demand and therefore allocating inventory accordingly with the right supply chain, or you have a fallback option like fungible inventory that if you have a pandemic and you have this massive unlock happening where demand is shifting, you can start reallocating faster. So I think that's probably a lot of learning in the industry is how do you kind of make that inventory more fungible over time as a Band-Aid first, right? Because demand forecasting, matching supply and demand happen over time, but at least you have that fungibility in the short term is some of the learnings we learned with inventory, which brings us to the other part of the coin, right? Which is demand. You guys all mentioned this, which is there's a lot of trouble forecasting the variability in demand, and especially from a supply chain point of view as you forward order and forward think about your business. So let's talk about that a bit more, which is the demand side. What has been your learning in terms of half of your job, which is obviously the supply side, but the other half in terms of how do you rationalize channels? And by that, what I mean is one of the key things that all of you guys do very well is to figure out what channel does what for you, right? In the offline world, historically, you've done very well between your own stores, between third-party channels, MBOs, EBOs, discounting, liquidation. You've managed each channel in a very different way and rationalized what that channel does for you. But post-pandemic, you've probably seen a new slew of channels that have become relevant, probably new channels that are evolving, that you are basically thinking of them as insular or connected to your larger backends. How has that thinking changed? I would love to hear from you guys. I'll start with Ayush. You have a wide variety of brands that you mentioned have different experiences, but talk me through your digital channel rationalization process, right? What are the new emerging channels that have surprised you, new learnings in terms of new channels that you've started exploring, and how are you starting to rationalize what online does for you, what offline does for you, and how do they come together from a demand point of view?
I think it's a very interesting question, but if I kind of lay out the big points in it, I think the big surprise of last year has been for me personally, I would say AJIO. Really going head to head with the big boys of online. We've
Yeah.
seen kind of big industrial houses try to launch their own websites and not really succeed to that level before. So very pleasantly surprised with the good work that the AJIO team is doing to kind of put together a compelling proposition for the end consumer. Uh, I think that definitely, and probably other people will also maybe be in the same boat as me. I'm a bit disappointed on my own internal work on our own company websites. I think that India as a market still continues to be dominated by marketplaces. It is. I know it's nice. It's the PE to be D2C to consumer. Everybody's kind of into that scheme. But I think the realities of the large consumer companies of India will be that 90% of their profits in online, or 99% of the profits in online, will be coming from marketplaces, and which is no surprises. Amazon, Flipkart, Myntra, the big guys kind of taking the big numbers. I think that definitely, and my personal view is that that malls are stuck between a hard place, because even though retailers like ourselves are not profitable, it's not as though they are tremendously profitable. They've kind of maybe forward discounted their rental incomes for many years into the future, and they don't have a lot of scope to make concessions. And now I start to really question that, does India need the malls in the way that it traditionally existed, so on and so forth, or like how we leapfrog the telephone lines, and we can kind of leapfrog this entire generation and move directly to online. With the exception, of course, the way we see it, like I mentioned earlier, also food retailing. Because food retailing is something that people have not, the logistics to the cost of operations for online is still to kind of get validated. And any place that has food around it will continue to drive significant footfalls, and important to kind of reorient our locations and our kind of channels around it. Definitely also there's a much faster pace of pickup in tier 2, tier 3 India. Many people are still working from home, from their native towns, cities, so on and so forth. I was in Jaipur this weekend, WTP Mall, never seen it so crowded. There's a line at all the counters and not being allowed to enter the shops. So tier 2 demand, tier 3 demand will pick up faster. I think that is a trend probably everybody will see. I think that everything around food retailing is what we are personally far more bullish on. I think that at the luxury end of the spectrum, like brands like Wacoal, brands like Samsonite, Accessorize, Crocs even, retail in malls will continue to remain extremely, extremely important. But for kind of the mass brands, I think departmental stores are going to have a hard time coming out of this. Central, Pantaloons, Lifestyle, Shoppers Stop, I don't see what their future looks like. I don't see how malls can really afford to give big concessions to landlords without kind of taking their pants off entirely. And that's just creating a pressure cooker, and that pressure cooker is going to explode. If you're a big guy like Reliance, you've got a large format store, then you can kind of stand it. But as we run very small shops, that we're kind of the first people to kind of be disregarded. And I think it's an interesting time. But I think offline will continue to survive in a much different manner than before. And India is going to lead the entire generation of consumers not having the department store experience. In the US, we saw Macy's, Nordstrom, everybody go through bankruptcy, financial challenges. India will probably never reach that stage of having a big department store kind of culture entirely, is what I feel could be one of the outcomes of the situation.
So offline still very strong, like you're saying, for you guys. Marketplaces, like you said, being a dominant channel. Any experimental channels, anything new? So let's talk in terms of storefronts, right? Because any new storefronts that you guys have opened up that have been surprises beyond marketplaces and your offline stores. And you said online, your primary site is a challenge. But any new storefront strategies that you're exploring?
Yeah.
Everybody explored a lot of these D2C sales, that we should ask our own staff to put up, exhibition sales, so on and so forth. And that was, I think that was the thing to do in the first months of the lockdown. But I think that the true surprise, and what I think will kind of continue to remain, is the big channel of corporate and institutional buying. I think even globally, if I look at our other kind of, because we work with global brands, etc., that anywhere between 10 to 20% of a consumer company sales to come from bulk purchases is not something that is too high, and especially in these environments when companies have outsized profits and there is a war for good talent. I see that there's a lot of demand for kind of bulk purchasing and kind of corporate gifting and that entire kind of direction of it, especially for products that are easily gifted. The products that don't have too much of so on and so forth.
Yeah. Sumit, I want to switch gears with you on this one also, which is, let's start with the second question first, which is, as you start rationalizing all your channels and the offline ones, the new digital ones, any surprises on new storefronts, new channels you're exploring that have kind of really shaped up post the pandemic for you?
Yeah, I think we have tried to use technology as a conduit to reach out to consumers and then to figure out, are there new ways of reaching out? And we have experimented with quite a few. We have experimented with live streams. We have launched products on social commerce for the first time, probably at least in this country. We have also done live streams for our stores. We have used influencers who have explained product, which has engaged consumers. That has worked really well. We have started using pop-ups in kiosk much more strategically now, given like Ayush also hinted on it. So yes, definitely done that. And digital, of course, has been an area of opportunity even before the pandemic. That has only accelerated now. And we see a lot more consumers now reaching to us through digital. And I was going through the data for Q2, which is April to March, and April to June, and I was surprised that a third of our digital sales is actually coming from the lower end of tier 2 and tier 3 towns in the country, and this is making us reach out to newer consumers. That's been super strong. And on the demand forecasting side, I think my view is, how much ever hard you try, you can't really forecast it accurately. Hence, it's not a forecasting problem at all.
Sure.
Looking at it as a forecasting problem is looking at the wrong end of the pipe. And I think the right way to look at it is can you make your supply chain agile enough to react to how consumers are buying? Because there is no way to really determine what consumers would want. And then that's the first part. And second part is keeping your allocation algorithm super flexible and reactive, and giving that the precedence over anything else, right? In terms of allocation decisions. So in a nutshell, forecasting is more allocation, more a supply chain problem than a real forecasting problem. And Eli Goldratt has talked about it so much. It's all on the web and in his book. I recommend every retailer, every supply chain professional, every salesperson to read that. And it's actually so simple when you look at that problem. Simple in terms of construct of solve, very difficult to execute though. And now there are tech solutions to help you at least with the allocation problem, if not with the supply chain problem. And I think that's how that's the journey that we are also looking at in trying to solve the forecasting problem.
Thanks, Sumit, on those points. Levin, would love to hear from you. Any new storefronts that you've been exploring? How are you rationalizing your overall channel mix beyond your .com, which you spoke about, and the stores that you spoke about? Anything else that you guys are exploring in this kind of post-pandemic period?
As I mentioned, I mean, we are looking at a few offline stores, but only if they make sense economically in terms of rental. And so far, they're only being standalone. I mean, I think going forward, the lesson for every brand should be just, you've got to stand for something. If you don't stand for something, you're not going to last very long. Like our only thing has been natural fabrics. And we've been there for nearly 40 years now. The customer just somehow trusts us, keeps coming back. Touch wood for that. God bless them. So, and as Ayush mentioned, something about the malls that, this department store and all to me has never been a great concept. Anyway, we've never been in MBOs, EBOs, nothing. We've only had our own stores. And I think this is the pandemic has really taught people that, I mean, if you're not online, you can forget about it. This is the future. So, I mean, we are very happy with our own website sales. And I mean, it's shown us, I think the sky is the limit. If you can do 30 times, there's no reason you shouldn't do 300 times. If you can just, match the stock and the social media and the imagery and tell the right story to the right people. I mean, it lets you even pick who you're, addressing versus a newspaper ad. I mean, it's that focused. And we are not on marketplaces, so we are looking at getting on all of them, hopefully maybe in the next month or so. So, I mean, I think we are poised to really, for us, the marketplace challenge is how do you cost? Because so far for us, it's XYZ costing. I make this, I sell at the store. And on marketplaces, nothing sells unless you're discounting maybe by at least 30%. So our challenge is going to be how do you cost that and how do you prevent that, how do you ensure that you're doing the same thing in your shops, on your website and on the marketplace without, customers getting cheesed off that you're selling something there at this price and here. Maybe you have to create a special range so that we are all, basically for us, the concept is going to be now totally digital, very few standalone shops if this thing makes sense. My main disappointment has been actually with all retailers because, I mean, I just wish we were united against the malls. You just take a stand that I'm not opening unless you give me revenue share for the next 6 months. But they're on these groups and it just doesn't happen. I mean, I've said it over there. I mean, everyone goes and does what they want finally. But I mean, if we just stuck together as a group, I don't see it wasn't happening. And we had to see what's going to happen with this lockdown now, whether they all stick together or no.
Yeah. No, I think you raise a very important point, which is the role of malls needs to evolve with the reality around us, right? I mean, at one point, it was a huge contribution to all of your P&Ls, given the footfalls that malls generate. In a year where malls are not generating that footfall, then obviously the nature of the relationship should change. Like you're suggesting,
mentioned, Nordstrom, Macy's, and all staring at bankruptcies. Even the US malls, I think, are doing terribly, most of them. But it's, most of them are like an hour or two away from where you live. It's the problem in India is that there's no entertainment for a normal human being unless you go to the mall. There's nothing else to do in the cities. So they might yet play that part. But they've just got to realize, that, you've got to treat us like human beings and not like, we are the customer finally, not you. But finally, that's all demand and supply. Yeah.
Sumit, you wanted to chime in on the mall point?
Yeah, so I have a contrarian view. I think malls are important and will continue to be important. And I think there is an opportunity. Digital business, what I've seen, does not grow in isolation. And I think both stores, whether in malls or high streets, and the digital business go hand in hand. Because for a lot of our consumers, stores are still the first port of introduction to the brand. And that's the true experiential center. And increasingly, we are seeing these lines blurring, where the same consumer is one day shopping in the mall. If they're traveling for a vacation, they're buying the brand from another store. And if they want to gift to somebody or for their own consumption, they go to digital and buy for convenience or for assortment or for pricing. There are various reasons. And I think every channel has a role to play. And we don't intend to be a mono-channel or a single channel dominant organization. I think all of them have roles to play. And malls are also like a social, and Lavin, I think, alluded to that point. So they are social centers as well, where families go and enjoy themselves and shop. And hence, we are equally bullish on high streets, malls, as we are on digital. And digital, of course, is accelerating, but that does not mean that it will come at the expense of stores.
Yeah, and Sumit, I think you're spot on. I think everybody in the panel would agree that malls are an important part of the destiny. I think Lavin's comment was more, I think the relationship of the relationship between the mall and the brand probably has to evolve as, like you mentioned, Sumit, the role of the mall changes. In fact, from personal experience, we were talking to a mall group in the Middle East, who said, look, exactly what you're saying, Sumit, what is the job to be done as a mall? And they said, look, our job is to provide an experience. Like Levin said, people come to our malls because there's nothing else that they want to do but be in the mall, for example, in the summers in the Middle East, right? That's the only destination you can go into. So we provide experience. Our job is to provide real experiences where people come into the mall. Now, if in a pandemic world, the footfall stops, our job doesn't end. Our job is to still provide that experience, but we will do it in a different way. And they are kind of working with us saying, look, part of our job is to help brands and retailers sell more, right? That's part of the experience we create. And so they're actually investing in an entire set of omni-channel capabilities where them as a mall group are enabling their brands to go omni-channel. So, I think the relationship still evolves, like you said, where there's still an important channel, but they do a different set of things for brands and retailers, which I think Levin's point is that that relationship has to evolve where you start talking in a different manner in terms of how do we work together. So I think that is probably a unique proposition that we are seeing post-COVID, where malls are changing the way they think about what they offer for brands and retailers and how can they help them in an omni-channel way. Which brings me to my last question before we jump into some Q&A, which is looking at your overall P&L as we talk about learnings and challenges from a omni-channel retail point of view post the pandemic. How have things changed from the P&L structure? Because one of the key critiques of doing omni-channel always has been that, as you start working across channels, as you start working across, doing marketing across different channels, it has an impact on the P&L structure, on your margins, right? Which is you start skewing towards channels that might have lower profitability. You're doing more marketing digitally. You're spending money inefficiently initially when you start creating new storefronts. And it has an impact on the P&L. So would love to hear from you guys, given that you guys are doing more multi-channel and more non-traditional channel retail than you were post-pandemic. How have your margins held up? Are things looking better, worse? Are you going through kind of a U-curve where you're investing and you'll see the returns later, or still too early to tell? I'll start with Ayush. Any thoughts on the impact on the margin structure with the new channel strategies?
I think that the cost of manpower in the offline channels is more or less offset by the cost of marketing in the online channels, the cost of customer acquisition, traffic acquisition, whatever you may call it. With, of course, the benefit being that in online it's far more variable. You can't be variable with your manpower. You can be variable with your kind of marketing spends.
Right.
Overall, of course, margins have come down across, but I think that has been more a function of the price discounting that happened when the kind of lockdown first lifted, followed by the rise in commodity prices, and there's a time lag in the transmission of prices to the end consumer. So because of that, I think margins have kind of been impacted. But I think the cost that India is on today, or the world economy seems to be on today, seems to be more of a supply side challenge than a demand side challenge. And when the macro is looking in that way, then I don't think anybody will have such a big challenge on their margins.
Yeah. Okay, Sumit, I'll switch gears to you. I know you have a hard stop, so I'll get you in before you jump off. Thoughts on what's happening with the margin structure in this kind of multi-channel world?
So margins are material information, and Crocs being listed, I can't comment much on this. Having said that, I chime in what Ayush mentioned. I think there is merit to investment in Omni. Because whatever you invest kind of more than pays for it. And I think in the long run, what we should all look at is, are we serving the consumer better because with the help of Omni? And if the answer is yes, and it's a resounding yes, because it gives one view of the inventory wherever you are, I think it is worth investing in. But yeah, I would like to not answer the margin question directly, because I think
and I didn't mean exact numbers. Just how do you see it more as a U-curve where you're investing and the returns come later, or are you seeing kind of great results out of your investment?
The ROI is good. I don't think ROI, when you look at it holistically, would be a deal breaker here. I think it's very positive and accretive.
Healthy. Perfect. Great. Thanks, Sumit. Levin, how are you guys, as obviously, like you said, a smaller concern, maybe compared to a lot of the international brands that we're talking about on the panel. How are you guys thinking about the margin implications of getting into multi-channel and omni-channel retail post-pandemic?
Right. No, we are not thinking, we're only trying to survive.
Honest answer, and I'm sure true answer. And I think that's and you're right, which is there is a stage of just kind of surviving that you have to get through. But longer term, how are you guys thinking about this in terms of what
After
this
the
does for
first
you?
lockdown, as I said, we really discounted heavily. So the margins were really hit. But this time we've not done that. Even on our online right now, I mean, now the US has started for about 4 or 5 days and it's going to go on. But before that, we were hardly discounting anything and the sales were happening. Maybe because of a lot of stores are closed. No, so, I mean, I don't really think the margins will be that badly hit. I mean, if things kind of keep improving from here, if you come and, I mean, just God help us if there's a third wave and everything shuts down again, then that's going to be again disastrous. But as of right now, I think it kind of looks okay. And I mean, in terms of marketing and all, definitely, I mean, I think anything you spend for us on the digital space is much, much less than what we used to do in print media and hoardings and all, which I think for us is now extinct. So I think, and it pays you back much more. You can even gauge results. You can see results. You can actually see how many people exactly looked at your ad, how many entered into your this thing, how many made a purchase. So all that, I think for us, that's the future, whichever way you look at it. Yeah.
Thanks, you guys. Great discussion. Thank you again for all your input. I'll open it up for questions from the audience. We have a few minutes. Any questions from the audience? If you can just you can write those in the chat box. I can pick those up.
Mukul, I need to drop off. So
yeah, Sumit. Thank you again, Sumit. Appreciate your time and appreciate your pointers there. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Ayush, Lavin. Nice
Thank
speaking.
you. Nice meeting you, Sumit.
I don't see any specific questions. And so I think we're actually at the top of the hour anyway. So I think maybe this is a good time to break. Ayush, Lavin, thank you again for your time. It's a pleasure talking to you guys about the key learnings and challenges in this post-pandemic world. As a summary, I think what is important is I think we all realize that this entire digital plus omni-channel journey, connecting online, offline, thinking about matching supply and demand better is an evolving journey. And I think you guys were all honest in being able to kind of help us think through where you are in the journey. From our primary experience, we're talking to brands and retailers in the region, what we've realized is there are kind of 3 steps in this journey. The first one being what I think all of us have experienced in this pandemic, which is how do you start kind of connecting your online, offline world in a smarter way, right? Your stores, your digital channels, how do you create the right synergies between connecting your stores to digital channels, your digital to your backends and your supply chains in a smarter way, and to really get off the ground by connecting the offline online world, which I think, like Lavin said, they've just gotten off the ground doing. Ayush has been doing it in different manners for different brands. The second step, which we hear our brand partners and retail partners keep asking for, is probably the next step where you guys are heading, which is how do you start simplifying the backend, right? The operations, the technology required to work with multiple channels, rather than having separate, complex channel-specific operations and technology. And the third step, which I think is the holy grail, which truly becomes a new reality post the pandemic, is how do you start conversing with your customer across channels and treating them as one customer across channels. I think that's probably the biggest ask out of this omni-channel roadmap is identifying your job as retailers to be owning customers, and therefore how do you own customers across channels in a smarter way rather than thinking about each channel being differently. So I think that's probably the progression where all of you guys are working towards, and it's great to hear the progress that's really happened post-pandemic as consumers are pushing us to do this even more and in a smarter way. So thank you guys, fantastic panel. Look forward to catching up with you guys offline.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice talking to
Thank
you.
Thank you, Ayush. Love it. Stay safe.